So today we are here to talk about adjunctification. Could you please describe what is adjunctification?
The use of professionals in the field to teach certain courses in addition to full-time faculty teaching, standard or higher level courses. But over time, and through what a number of scholars have sort of declared as being neoliberalization or neoliberalism, the financialization of public universities and private, the use of adjuncts have become a much more common phenomenon to the extent that sometimes 70% of course loads during a given semester or given academic year are taught by adjuncts, which, from any standpoint, sort of betrays the very notion of what the faculty or the larger liberal arts college or university is doing, is sort of masking the notion that the folks who are hired are there on a full-time and non-contingent basis. If your authority as an instructor, people immediately assume upon entering the class that your title is professor, which is a false assumption. Especially if you're an adjunct, your title is lecturer. Technically, you're an instructor. Although if you have your doctorate, I try to insist people call me Dr. B or Dr. Aultman, although it has a tendency to be overly formal. B is perfectly fine. Yeah, the assumption is, oh, you're a professor. You're sort of built-in, tenured already within the system of the university. And that tends not to be the case, at least from percentages these days, and hadn't been the case in my own experience. So adjunctification it describes a process by which universities develop a kind of almost a dependency, and it's a codependence that ends up being the case, a dependency upon contingent, part-time, poorly paid labor for the purposes of teaching introductory and sometimes higher tier classes in order to save money in many instances. For whatever reason, that's the university's own sort of logic. So.
Per course teaching here, how much approximately would you make?
Oh, sure. The average, I'll give the average, is $3,000 per course. There's a fight in New York City, or a struggle, to increase adjunct pay to $7,000 a course, which is livable wages if you teach at least 2 courses on some level. But at the end of the day, you settle $3,000. In one sense, you're lucky if you do find a course that's available in your teaching field, and so you take it and attempt to add on as many courses as you can until it's enough pay.
Do you feel that a lot or most of the paycheck goes to transportation?
It can. In my experience, it did and still does, where it could be about a quarter of the pay can be spent getting to and from, say, Purchase College. I live in Brooklyn. If you're teaching in and around the area in which you live, that's great. But for someone commuting in to White Plains, and if you divide out, say, $3,000 per course, you're spending almost $100 a week, possibly, getting to the course to teach. It does become a burden. Having a place to live, rent, I think I've just recently read, right, 2/3 of someone's income on average. So it's about 2/3 of my income.
2/3, and there's already a quarter gone.
And there's already a quarter gone. So.
And what happens if you get sick?
If you get sick and you're not on the university's healthcare program or insurance coverage, then it comes out of pocket, or you just have to, you have a couple of options. You stay home, which can look poorly, again, upon canceling class, for example. You can rack up a hospital bill. Many adjuncts are on Medicaid. If they do sign up for the university's healthcare program, it can often be roughly $20 to $30 out of a paycheck. Again, that's $20 to $30 that could have gone towards transportation, and so there's a lot of consideration here that sounds like the potential for catastrophic care instead of preventative care. And this, I think, affects a lot of those adjuncts who, I think, within an industry plagued by issues of mental health, maintaining adequate mental health through medication, therapy, psychiatric visits, etc., is only more problematic if you don't have proper health insurance. So,
Since we already have 2/3 going away to rent, 1/4 going away to transportation, and then if you ever need to go to the doctor, you have to pay that out of pocket. Have you ever had times when maybe your daily amount was a bit lower than maybe you needed to for food or something?
mm-hmm. For sure. I've been on EBT in the past, and that's after teaching 3 or 4 classes at one time across different university campuses to make up for that difference. Yeah, there have been many moments where I've had to make a decision between getting to campus and saving that money and thus not eating properly because of a lack of a disposable income. In a very dissimilar way that, say, someone who has tenure might experience and could otherwise, again, distance themselves from.
So this may sound a strange question, but in your mind, anything that comes to mind, what does a tenured professor look like?
Tenured positions throughout the American Academy are overly white, particularly male, and patently cisgender. There is, at the same time, a series of expectations from students that reflect some of that very cultural problematic and continue to underserve and, in that sense, undermine women of color in the academy, people from trans communities, queer communities, etc., to that extent that the average tenured professor is, again, the white male. And that's got to change substantially. I don't ever dissuade, especially for those who want and I think need to be pursuing new positions in academia. But I do say these are the potential pitfalls to be aware of. My advice of moving into this new economy or this different economy is to be aware of those things. But I think that a lot of people who the age range now between 22 to 25 are growingly aware, or at least that's my cruel optimism, if you will, is that they're aware of these shifts and these expectations, what exploitation might look like in its economic forms, and in that awareness, keeping open the possibility of changing the economic form itself.